HealthEd is Australia's leading provider of quality clinical education for doctors and other healthcare professionals. This episode has been made available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. For free access to the full library of podcasts and to claim CPD for listening, visit healthed.com.au or download the HealthEd app.
Hello, my name's Dr. Vivian Miller, and today we've got Dr. Andrew Browning, who's the Medical Director of the Barbara May Foundation, a Chair of the International Federation of Obstetrics and Gynecologists, Chair of the Expert Advisory Group for Obstetric Fistulas, so very highly qualified, and he's here to tell us today a little bit about the Barbara May Foundation and his work. Hello Andrew, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Well, tell us first about the Barbara May Foundation.
The Barbara May Foundation, my father and I started back in 2009. I had been working as a missionary obstetric fistula surgeon in Ethiopia. Really, I was introduced to that in 1996. But treating this condition of obstetric fistula led me to the thought that it is preventable and we need to do more to prevent it. So I started the Barbara May Foundation to do, well, not only to expand the work that we were doing in Ethiopia and take it to the rest of Africa, but also to prevent it from happening in the first place. So we started that, and the idea of the Barbara May Foundation is to treat obstetric fistulas and to prevent them. And we prevent them by building maternity hospitals. So we've built 3 maternity hospitals and run them. And we have a big rural network to deliver women safely. So we deliver up to about 15,000 women for free every year in some of the most impoverished areas of the world. But there's always room to expand. We hope to expand. And we also treat obstetric fistula patients, of course, across many countries around Africa, and train people to do the same. So it's been a lot of work, but there's lots of work to do, and it's all done through the Barbara May Foundation, an Australian-based charity.
So, Andrew, would you be able to tell us what a fistula actually is, and also the types of fistula, just to refresh people's memory or to educate them if they're not sure?
So fistula is a Latin word meaning pipe, and what we're talking about is a pipe or a hole between 2 epithelial surfaces. So the medical definition of fistula is a communication between 2 epithelial surfaces. So you can have a fistula anywhere between your trachea and your esophagus. So that's the 2 epithelial surfaces there. But the fistulas I'm concerned with is obstetric fistula. And so that's communication between the epithelial surfaces of the female reproductive tract and the bladder or the urinary tract, and the bowel, and the reproductive tract and the bowel. So there can be all different types between the ureter and the vagina, can be between the uterus and the bladder, could be, but more likely it's a combination. It's urethra, bladder, and cervix and vagina, because they're often very large, sometimes about 10 centimeters in diameter, even bigger. And then of course the bowel and the vagina too.
Can you tell us the types of obstetric fistula that you deal with?
Yeah, so the obstetric fistula I deal with used to be actually quite common in America and Australia and Europe over about 100 years ago, but we've eradicated them now. But they still happen frequently around the world wherever women can't have access to safe obstetric care. The easiest to describe what an obstetric fistula patient is by telling you a patient's story. So I'll tell you the story of Ngolo, which is a story that I use quite frequently. She was a lady I treated in Tanzania a couple of years ago, and she lived right in the deep south of Tanzania, far from any sort of medical help, far from any communication and roads. So the nearest hospital to her was about 150 kilometers away, but there was no roads, there was no communication. So Ngolo was married about the age of 15, she thinks. She's not sure how old she was, about 15. And soon afterwards, she became pregnant. She did what all women in her village did, and she tried to deliver at home, simply because there was no health professionals anywhere nearby. In that hospital, 150 kilometers away, there was no transport and no money for transport. So she had no option but to deliver at home. After a day of labor, Ngolo hadn't delivered her baby, because she was one of the 5% of women anywhere in the world that get into obstructive labor. So this is speaking to GPs, they know all about it. It's mother's pelvis is too big, mother's pelvis is too small, baby's head's too big. You get cephalopelvic disproportion and the baby gets stuck in labor, or sometimes the baby's coming out the wrong way. So here that's diagnosed in labor, and you have a cesarean section and everything's fine. But for Ngolo, with no access to a midwife or doctor or even pain relief, she stayed in labor. She was in labour for another day. So at the end of 2 days of labour, she still hadn't delivered. Her husband, he was also unschooled, but was desperately trying to work out a way to help his wife. And he had the idea that if he boiled a basin of water and put her feet into the boiling water, it would stimulate her uterus to contract. He did this for 2 more days. And at the end of 4 days of labour, Ngolo still hadn't delivered her child. She was now unconscious, and unconscious on the 5th day of labour, she delivered a dead stillborn child. It took her 2 days to regain consciousness, but when she did regain consciousness, she found that she was leaking uncontrollably from her bladder and also her bowel. Because she'd been in labour for so long, the baby's head had been pressed against her pelvis, and all the tissues between vagina, birth canal, rectum, birth canal, all had its blood supply cut off. All those tissues died. And so after she delivered the stillborn child, those dead tissues came away, and she was left with a big fistula, the psychovaginal fistula and rectovaginal fistula. She leaked continually. She stank. She was ashamed. Husband divorced her. She went back to live with her mother. Mother couldn't keep her in the house because she smelled so badly. So she was put in a little mud hut at the edge of the family compound, and unable to walk because of burns on her feet, Ngolo stayed in there for 18 months. She was eventually found by mission and brought to that hospital 120 kilometres away. The doctors there tried to help her, but they hadn't been trained in fistula surgery. So they did 3 operations and she wasn't cured. She was then found by our outreach workers in northern Tanzania and brought to us. And we operate under spinal anaesthetic, so they were awake during the operation. And Ngolo had so given up hope that she could ever be cured that she just sobbed uncontrollably throughout the operation. So in my career, I've met about 12,500 women, all with stories like Ngolo. I mean, that Ngolo's story is not unusual. I hear them day after day. And we estimate there's about 2 million women in the world suffering with obstetric fistula, and they still haven't been found anyone to treat them. When I first started doing fistula surgery back in the 1990s, the global capacity stood at about 2,000 women being treated. But now it's improved because we've trained so many surgeons, and there's about over 450 centres around the world now that offer fistula surgery, and the global capacity stands about 25,000 women getting treated now. So it's expanded, but there's still a lot of work to be done. But the more important work, of course, is prevention, because we prevented it. Actually, the world's first fistula hospital was opened in New York in 1855 because there was fistula patients there. That's now closed because our countries have eradicated obstetric fistula purely because every woman can see a midwife to observe her pregnancy and her labour and call a doctor to do a cesarean if it's needed. We will only eradicate it in countries like Tanzania and Ethiopia, where I've spent my professional career, once all women have access to that. So midwives, hospitals, free delivery will eradicate it there too. But it is lovely surgery to be involved with. Ngolo had catheter in her bladder for 2 weeks after the operation, and she saw all the other patients in the ward getting cured, and she slowly started to liven up and open up and smile and interact with everybody. And the day came when her catheter was removed after 2 weeks, and she was dry. She was completely dry, incontinent. She had her dignity restored, and she was just so overjoyed, smiling from ear to ear, jumping up and down, saying, "Look, I'm going to go home. I'm never going to meet another man. I'm never going to be married again." Fair enough, very wise thoughts. And she's wanted to go to school and start a new life. So she was able to go to a nearby school, and I caught up with her about a year ago, and she's going back to school, and her ambition is that one day she'd like to be a midwife and help women not go through what she went through. So it's lovely surgery to be a part of. You can really transform someone's life just by doing a procedure.
This episode is one of hundreds of informative and free clinical podcasts from Health Ed. Access the entire library through the Health Ed app for healthcare professionals, which you can download today from the App Store.
That's a very, very touching story, isn't it? You must get so much satisfaction out of your career. We don't know how lucky we are in first world countries. We really, really don't. It's horrific what people go through.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's the majority of the world's population still face things like this and still die in pregnancy. In one area where we work, there was literally nothing to help pregnant women, and 1 in 12 women would die during their lifetime trying to have a baby. And that sort of thing just is unfathomable for people in our societies. But you don't have to go back that far. I mean, just 100 years ago in America, the maternal mortality ratio was 800 maternal deaths per 100,000 deliveries, higher than countries like Ethiopia and Tanzania now. And we've brought it down to negligible rates within 100 years just by ensuring all women can have access to a safe delivery. And so we know what needs to be done. We just lack the motivation to do it. We have the resources, we have the knowledge to do it. We just don't have the motivation to do it, unfortunately.
Oh, well, how did you get into this, Andrew? Through your dad?
No, indirectly, I suppose. As I going through medical school, and even before that, I always thought I'd be a missionary doctor. I grew up in a Christian household, and we always had missionaries come and speak to us at our local church and telling us what they were doing, building hospitals and serving people and in all different interesting places around the world. So I thought that's what I do. And as a medical student, I went and worked in a mission hospital in Tanzania. And right at the beginning of the Rwandan genocide, so we had about 25,000 people just arrive on our doorstep pretty well overnight. And it was pretty eye-opening for a young 22, 3-year-old or something. And to be involved with that, and after having a very sheltered life growing up in rural New South Wales and going to Sydney University, but I was convinced that this is the way I should be using what God's given me, my talents to serve the needy and the poor. So my aunt has been living in Ethiopia since 1974. She has a huge aid organisation there, and I went as a junior doctor. I quit as an RMO1 and went to go to Ethiopia and work with her in the nomadic desert. And loved the work, although it's pretty hard work in the desert, living with nomads and 50-degree heat, and just sleeping out with the hyenas and things coming close to night and so forth. But during my time in Ethiopia, I visited a lady called Dr. Catherine Hamlin at the fistula hospital. My father was an obstetrician. He had heard about the fistula hospital in Addis Ababa, and he told me that I should visit. So I visited, and when I left Ethiopia that time, Catherine rang me up and said, look, come and work for me. So I thought about it and prayed about it, studied theology for a year, then moved back to Ethiopia at the end of that year, 1997, to start working with Dr. Hamlin. But the Ethiopian government said, no, you have to have obstetrics gynecology training before we give you a work permit. So then I did that between England, Australia and Ethiopia. And as soon as I finished that in 2001, I moved to Ethiopia and settled there.
So with the Barbara May Foundation, what are your plans for the future for this?
So I started the Barbara May Foundation to take what I'd learned in Ethiopia with Catherine to the rest of Africa. So Catherine's organisation treats fistulas in Ethiopia. I wanted to spread it to the rest of Africa, and also to stop them from happening by building maternity hospitals. And so the plans for the future is to build more and do more, but that's all dependent on funds, of course. We're very blessed. We've got just received or receiving funds for plans to build 2 more hospitals, another one in Tanzania and another one in Uganda. But it's been estimated that we need to build 2,000 maternity hospitals around Africa to stop women from dying and stop women getting fistulas. So this will, when these 2 are completed, that'll be 6. And so we've only got 1,994 to go. So that's the plans.
So, Andrew, how does this foundation get funded?
It gets funded from all sorts of areas. I mean, I was a missionary doctor in Africa, volunteer, so unpaid, so supported by churches for 17 years, and I'm still not working as a doctor in Australia, supported largely by churches through the Barbara May Foundation. And I like to say that, I mean, the church does a lot of work around the world, all as an outworking of their faith. And I'm not alone. There's thousands of people like me doing this. In fact, the church and the missions provide about 50% of all healthcare for Africa, and similar proportion for education. About 45% of education for Africa is provided by the church, the mission schools. So they do an awful lot of work. And so the Barbara May Foundation is funded a lot through churches, but also a lot through family foundations and organisations, and that all is tax deductible through the Barbara May Foundation.
Yes. And how can people help? How can listeners help or get involved?
Yeah, I mean, we're totally reliant on people's kind donations to be able to do this, and it doesn't cost much. It only costs 200 Australian dollars to ensure a woman has a safe delivery. That's all her 4 clinic visits while she's pregnant, her antenatal visits, with ultrasounds, blood tests, delivery in our hospital, 14% cesarean rates in our hospital, and the postnatal visit and immunise a child costs 200 Australian dollars, and we get pretty much the same standard results for the mother, at least, as the hospitals here in Australia. So, and we do have little small NICUs, so we can look after babies with CPAP and basic things. We can keep reasonably premature babies alive, but the grossly premature babies we unfortunately can't help. So it's comparatively cheap. And so please help with that. We're also reliant on volunteers. We need obstetricians and midwives, but GP obstetricians could be able to help in places like South Sudan, where getting visas is a little bit easier, more flexible than more mature bureaucracies that you have in older countries. So South Sudan is quite a new country. We can have GP obstetricians come and help there. But yeah, it's tough, it's hot, it's humid.
Yes.
So
Yes. And very satisfying, I should imagine.
Yeah, it's fun work. I mean, it's stressful work. I mean, you do have to deal with all the emergencies like the eclamptic patients, the severe PPHs, the ruptured uteri, all those things.
Sounds like my hospital training here.
Every unusual case. I mean, yes.
It's a real education.
I've had in the cervix rupturing into the broad ligament, and abdominal pregnancies, and everything.
Wow. Wow.
There's a lot of fun. The pathology is dramatic and it's exciting, and you can do a great deal with very little.
I think that you're an absolutely amazing person. I think the work you do is fantastic, and I'm so grateful on behalf of all the listeners, I'm sure, for the joy that you bring so many people. And that's Dr. Andrew Browning. So thank you so much, Andrew, and I really hope that some good comes from this interview. And I wish you all the best.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you for listening. Visit healthed.com.au to create a free account and claim CPD for podcasts like this and access a record of your learning. Subscribe to the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts for weekly episodes on a range of clinical areas relevant to your ongoing practice.